Good afternoon, and welcome back to another podcast session with Rumination with Andrew. And it's my distinct pleasure to welcome you again and hope that we can have another scintillating discussion. Now, I read today something that was, and I should say yesterday, that I read an article or a number of articles which suggested that let me read the title here, and I think I could share my screen with you. But this was coming from an online paper. I think it's an online Jamaican paper, and it says that Jamaica ranked among safest countries by global analytics firm Gallup. So let me share that article with you to just show you what this article is saying. I found this to be quite concerning, to say the least. So let me share that article with you. It says here, respected international analytics firm, Gallup Inc., has ranked Jamaica among the safest countries in the world to be in its 2003 Gallup Law and Order report. An article by Breaking Travel News, BTN, reported that Gallup has placed Jamaica in a category with countries like New Zealand, Costa Rica, and Cyprus. BTN is a leading website for news, interviews, and developments in the travel and tourism industry. And I thought that that was something very interesting. Now, the Jamaica Observer says massive boost for Jamaica, screams this article. And it says here, Jamaica has been ranked among the safest countries in the world. Respected international analytics firm Gallup Inc. has stated in its 2023 Global Law and Order report. The Gallup report has Jamaica sharing company with New Zealand, Costa Rica, and Cyprus in a story published by Breaking Travel News, regarded as the leading online resource for travel industry executives around the world. Now, look at this report. The report also said Jamaica scored 75 out of a maximum 100 points, which ranks the island among the safest countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, coming slightly ahead of the U.S. territory of Puerto Rico at 74, followed by Brazil 73, Argentina 70, Mexico 66, Venezuela 66, the Dominican Republic 64, Peru 61, and Ecuador 59. And that I find very hard to believe. Now, with the high murder rates that we are actually, experiencing in Jamaica, how can Jamaica be one of the safest places in the world in which to live? Ahead of the Dominican Republic? I think not, right? I do not think that that is true. And this is one of the things that we're having with our present world, right? This is one of the problems that we need to solve, that many of our sense-making institutions are actually lying to us for political gains and for political expedience. Now, that information, that news article or the articles that I've just read, I think should not be published, because we're living in a world now where the mainstream media are telling us that we are being inundated with disinformation. But as far as I am concerned, these two articles that I have just referenced are examples of disinformation. They are prime examples of what we would call disinformation, because that cannot be true. And if our politicians think that the populace in Jamaica is actually dumb and cannot think for themselves, how dare you think that people whose lives are being snuffed out daily think that this is one of the safest places to live on earth? It is not true. It is not true. And if we're going to use these articles or use this false reality, I should say, then we are never going to solve the crime problem. Because one of the solutions for any problems is to ensure that you look at the root cause and you first accept that there is a problem, right? But if we're suggesting that we are one of the safest places to live in, that Jamaica is indeed a safe place to live in, or one of the safest places in the world to live in, then I don't think that our leaders are going to perceive that there is a problem, right? Because they are being told by, according to the news sources, respectable international organizations, right? What sort of respect can this organization have? Or is it that Jamaica is providing them with inaccurate information? Because there is no way that they can understand the reality on that island right now and think that by any stretch of the imagination, that country is safe to live in. It is one of the most murderous countries in the world. And am I proud to say that? No, I'm not proud to say that. It affects me. It burns me that the land of Marcus Messiah Garfield, right? The most important Black man, arguably, of the 20th century. And this is the information that Jamaica is sending to the world, when the world also knows differently, right? Now, look at the Gleaner. I want to highlight an article that was shared in the Gleaner that's coming from the Gleaner. And let me get here. This is coming from the Gleaner now. And this is the primary newspaper on the island. And it says here, the title of this article is Robbery Rampage. It says Westmoreland businesses lock shop as robbery sprees trigger fear. Now listen to what these business guys are saying. And this is in Westmoreland, right? A rural community that was once very safe, right? Now, it says that criminals have been relieving several Westmoreland businesses of their daily sales in a number of robbery sprees in the commercial spaces of Negril, Good Hope, and other major towns in the parish since the start of this week. On Friday, armed robbers held up and robbed 4 business establishments, 3 bars, and a supermarket between Orange Hill and what's that here? Naparial Road in Negril space, making off with an undetermined sum of money, game boxes, and top shelf liquors. Now, look at what these guys are saying, the business owners are saying. Right now, everybody is running scared because the belief is it is the same set of youngsters that are going around stealing cars and going around robbing. Elaine Bradley Allen, president of the Negril Chamber of Commerce and Industry, NCCI, told the Gleaner. She said that the latest surge is scary, and business owners are pondering how best to protect themselves and their establishments. I think it would be nice if we have the SOE back in Westmoreland, said Bradley Allen, noting that the trauma on the family of these being killed is horrendous. So we're seeing here where the business people, right, are suggesting that the crime and violence really are out of hand, and that we need to do something about it. But the international organization, along with the government, seem to have us believe that nothing is wrong, everything is okay. Let's go back to the Observer article, the article that was in the Observer, because I wanted you to hear what the Minister of Tourism, that's Edmund Bartlett, and there was also Delano Siberite, what he had to say also. Let's look at the top in the list. Okay, so Breaking Travel News said when it contacted Delano Siberite, senior advisor and strategist in Jamaica's Minister of Tourism, he declined to comment extensively on the report, but said The safety of every Jamaican and every visitor matters greatly. Notably, the crime rates against visitors remains extremely low. This is what he's saying, hovering at around 0.01%, and already our visitor numbers are double-digit percentages ahead of 2019 and 2022. Jamaica is abuzz like never before, and millions have visited over the years without incident. So he's more concerned about the visitors and not the locals, right? Now, what sort of neo-colonial country? This is sort of what we call neo-slavery, right? Because you're suggesting here that the citizens, the locals, the residents are not that important. They're complaining. And the business owners down there, the local business owners are complaining about the uptick, the uprise in crime and violence, and that their businesses are not safe, right? Is it not important for local businesses to be safe? Because they are investing in the people down there. Because we if truth be told, the tourism industry is just a neo-colonial, neoliberal way of, economic growth. It's not providing any permanent growth or investment in the real economy. Because most of these entrepreneurs, they send back their monies to their countries of origin or to other tax haven countries, right? So we know that tourism is not going to solve Jamaica's intractable economic problems, socioeconomic problems. We know that. That is a fact, right? And I'm not suggesting that tourism might not add some value, but it cannot be the number one source of income if we're thinking of building the local economy. We've got to produce, we've got to be more self-reliant. And that is why we need to start teaching Garveyism in our schools, to teach the whole philosophy of being self-reliant. Though the years have changed, the realities are the same, right? If we don't have a self-reliant economy, then we're opened to being abused and exploited by foreign investors. And I sometimes wonder what is the correlation between the foreign investors and the crime and violence we're seeing in Jamaica? Because sometimes we think the crime and violence only comes from the lower stratum of society. But if truth be told, our economies are criminal economies, and a lot of times it's the top down, comes from the top. It filters down to the bottom, right? So I think that more studies need to be done. But one of the things about studies is that a lot of our studies are superficial, and they tell us what we want to hear, or what the politicians who, and these, large corporations tell them that they should publish. Because most of the times they fund these research projects, right? So they will influence, they have disproportionate influence on the results and the findings. And these are things that we must be aware of. There are sometimes people are calling for statistics and say they want to see statistics, and it's good, but can those statistics be trusted? Right? Because oftentimes they are doctored to suit a particular philosophy or political ideology or a political campaign. And we know that we're in election season, or just about to approach election season in Jamaica. And perhaps that is the reason why the government seems to be using this as some form of propaganda to boost its image to the Jamaican population. even though it knows that what this is saying is not true. Bartlett, who is also the Minister of Tourism, according to Bartlett, 1.05 million airline seats have been secured from nearly 6,000 flights coming into the island out of the United States, Jamaica's biggest source market during the winter season, which begins on December 15th. The surge in airlift, he said, represents an increase of 13% over winter 2022-2023, when Jamaica recorded 923,000 airline seats. So he's not going to also speak or address the problem of crime and violence, right? It's more important to talk about the number of tourists going to Jamaica, right? Because the lives of the tourists are more important than the lives of the locals, be they ordinary citizens in terms of the ordinary man on the street, or the local entrepreneurs, Jamaican entrepreneurs. And that, to me, is unacceptable and should be addressed immediately, right? There are just too many people being killed, being murdered daily on the island of Jamaica, right? And if we continue to ignore the realities of the crime problem, how are we going to solve it? How are we going to solve that problem? And I'm calling on the Governor General, that's Sir Patrick Allen, right? Sir Patrick Allen, you are a pastor. You were probably a senior pastor in the Adventist Church. And I hear you say nothing about the crime and violence that seems to be bedeviling the island of Jamaica. Nothing comes from your mouth. You understand more than any other person in the government, since you're a senior pastor, or was a senior pastor, is perhaps still one in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, that thou shalt not kill, right? And that God does not like when people slaughter other human beings, because we are not creators, right? And we should be our brother's keepers. Now, Mr. Allen, Pastor Allen, Dr. Allen, I think he has a PhD. What are you doing? What are you doing in terms of alerting our government officials, Andrew Holness and his other colleagues? What are you saying to them behind the scenes? Are you bringing this problem to them? What are the solutions to this homicide problem in Jamaica? What difference are you making in that office as Governor General? Do you think that God is pleased with the fact that there are so many Jamaican lives being snuffed out without any form of justice being done? If there's any, probably limited form of justice, right? And this is a yearly occurrence. What sayest thou, Governor General? Huh? And you cannot talk about, the whole matter of being a Daniel, because Daniel was known to speak the truth. And perhaps you need to speak the truth to Andrew Holness and to his Minister of National Security, or demit the office. Because what's the sense if you're there as a representative of God and you are not making a difference, right? Because you should understand better than any of the people there that angels are recording immaculately the homicide rate in Jamaica. And they understand more than anyone in this in the world where these crime or who these culprits are. Right? And I am not hearing anything of substance, anything substantive coming from you, Governor General, Sir Patrick Allen. Okay? It's time for us to begin to speak frankly, right? To have an open dialogue on this matter of crime and violence. We cannot continue to put this thing under the rug. And that was something that was deceiving. The articles that were written in the Loop newspaper, the online newspaper, and also in the Jamaica Observer. Shame on you guys. Yeah, you can report it, but you should also have contextualized it by debunking that according to the statistics in our world, the homicide rate, Jamaica is listed as perhaps among the top 3 murderous countries in the world. So how can we be one of the safest countries in the world? Because you want to protect tourism and that economic interests at the expense of ordinary citizens there in Jamaica? So who will defend their rights, if not the government? Something that we need to think about. You know, I just wanted to read something that is enlightening. I have this book by C.L.R. James, and he's talking about the Black Jacobins. For those of you who have read the Black Jacobins, a very fascinating book written by the Caribbean intellectual, the West Indian intellectual, C.L.R. James. Now, you know, James is saying here in the appendix, and I hope you can listen to me. I don't have it on my screen, so I'll try to read as, as slowly as I can. The British system, unlike the French, does not crush the quest for a national identity. Instead, it stifles it, right? That's what it does. And sometimes I do wonder if Jamaica, for all the years that it has been independent of Great Britain, if our identity is stifled. I think we're confused. I don't think we understand who we are as a people. We have not yet forged a national identity. And I think just like the British, who stifled the growth, the nourishing of this national identity, I think that our politicians have taken over that position. And they're stifling not only our national identity, but our national growth and development. Something that I think our politicians need to think about. But the old colonial system consisted of insular economies, each with its financial and economic capital in London. All right, so that's what he said. That was what used to happen. Remember now that this book was written in 1938, so that's a long time ago. He revised it in the 60s, so we're talking about years ago, decades ago. A federation meant that the economic line of direction should no longer be from island to London, but from island to island. But that involved the breakup of old colonial system. The West Indian politicians preferred the breakup of the federation. 2 of the islands have actually been granted independence, and that at the time were Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago. The Queen of England is their queen. You know, now we have the king, but at that time, Queen Elizabeth II was the queen. They receive royal visits. Their legislatures begin with prayers. Their legislative bills are read 3 times. A mace has been presented to each of these distant infants by the member of parliaments. Their prominent citizens can receive an assortment of letters after their names, and in time, the prefix Sir, right, as we call Sir Patrick Allen. This no longer lessens but intensifies the battle between the colonial system and democracy, right? So there is a struggle because Jamaica is still under that system, right? Where the king, the current king, is still the head of state as we speak. Now, so there is a current battle, right? As James is here suggesting, between the colonial system and democracy. So Jamaica is not as democratic as it purports, right? It has that battle. And for that reason, I think the national identity is still being forged, if ever. I don't know if it will ever be forged because I don't think the politicians are interested in forging a strong and solid national identity. This is my opinion based on what I have been reading of the history and also my analyses of what I think Jamaica really is. Long before the actual independence was granted, large numbers of the middle classes, including their politicians, wanted it put oil as far into the distance. So they wanted it put, they wanted it put off. Right, let me read it again because I had this thing underlined here. Long before the actual independence was granted, large numbers of the middle classes, including their politicians, wanted it put off as far into the distance as possible. For the cruiser in the offing, the prospect of financial gifts and loans, they turn long eyes and itching feet towards the United States, right? So as soon as they became independent, right, they now turned their eyes towards the United States of America, right? So many people think when they're, oh, we want to become a Republican, a republic, we want to become a Republican state. Because they think that because we have the King of England, as the so-called ceremonial head of state, that he runs the show in Jamaica, but he does not run the show, right? The show is run by the people in Washington because that is the new empire and we live in their backyard, right? The manifest destiny still applies to us. And whether or not the Britons wanted to, they had to leave, whether or not their empire had fallen, right? Because the US had long declared to European powers that she runs the show in the Western Hemisphere, right? In this part of the hemisphere, that she ought to run the show. So this thing about Jamaica spending millions of dollars, right, to receive Republican status is just a sham, right? Very artificial, phony. Nothing significant is going to happen in terms of the change in the socioeconomic, the socioeconomic realities of the ordinary Jamaican person. Now, listen to what he's saying here. The Caribbean is now an American sea. All right, and this is being read on page 409. You can read, you can go, those of you who have the book Black Jacobins, on page 409, you can go there and read it for yourself, right? Because James is saying, and he is correct. And I'm sure this is, I think the appendix here was added in the 1960s when he upgraded his book, when he updated his book. But he says the Caribbean is now an American sea. It is not a British sea, right? As much as the King of England is declared as Jamaica's head of state, but he doesn't run the show, right? And if Jamaica is in a spat, as we saw in 2010 with the US, and when the US sent its drones down there to kill off innocent people, the King of England couldn't do anything about that and wasn't interested in doing anything about that because guess what? Nothing that he could do. And he would not contest the American power or authority. So he begins to talk about Puerto Rico, and that Puerto Rico is in fact a we call it a commonwealth of the United States, that the United States runs the show in that country. But here's what he says about the Dominican Republic. In the Dominican Republic, there is need to go beyond saying that Trujillo, and for those of you who don't know, Trujillo was a dictator on this island, and he ruled this island with an iron fist from 1931 to 1961, I think, when he was killed by the United States entities and the Dominican military. So, so in the Dominican Republic, there is no need to go beyond saying that Trujillo had gained power by the help of the United States Marines, and all through the more than a quarter century of his infamous dictatorship. He was understood to enjoy the friendship of Washington. So it was Washington who held him up, right? And who secured his reign. And he's correct. I read the history, and if you read the history, you understand that Trujillo had become very wealthy. I think before he died, this Dominican dictator was the 10th richest person in the world, right? He owned almost every corporation in this country, right? He and his family. And the United States supported him. However, like most dictators, what happens? They become proud and they want to do their own things, and the United States could not allow him. He started to do a lot of things that the US was also embarrassed about, including the attempted assassinations of presidents, right, across the region. And the United States did not want to be associated with someone who was creating that sort of terrible deeds in the region. All right. And the story is very long and sordid. It's a long and sordid history here in this country. But isn't the world, the world's history a long and sordid history? Not only this country, but the US and all countries, including Jamaica, we have a very terrible history. History of criminality and the fight over scarce benefits and spoils, right? Now, before the recent election of his successor, Sir Juan Bosch, the French newspaper stated that as item of news that members of the left in the Dominican Republic, names were deported to Paris by the local police, who were assisted in this operation by members of the FBI. Trujillo gone. He also said Duvalier of Haiti is the uncrowned king of Latin American barbarism. It is widely believed that despite the corruption and impertinence of his regime, it is American support which keeps him in power. Better Duvalier than another, Castro. So Duvalier, that reigned also terror on Haitian citizens, on his own people, also was a puppet of the United States of America, right? Now, listen to what James is saying. I know I have to end very soon. Such a mass of ignorance, this is now James speaking, and falsehood has surrounded these islands for so many centuries that obvious truths sound like revelations. Because if you tell the ordinary person in the Caribbean, including Jamaica, or even here, that the United States, to some degree, for the most important aspects of the country, the major decisions that need to be made, that they run the show. People think that, no, we are independent, we're a sovereign nation, and the United States does not have anything to do with us, right? And I'm not saying that they're doing every little minute detail that they're involved in would be impossible, right? Because they're human beings. However, major decisions, right? Particularly if it has to do with the growth and the equal distribution of the wealth. The United States is not going to have it. and something that we need to understand. Now, when he was principal of the University of the West Indies in Jamaica, Professor Arthur Lewis, former head of the Faculty of Economics at Manchester University, and at the time of writing, due to head the same faculty at Princeton, tried to remove some cobwebs from the eyes of his fellow West Indians, right? Because we have had cobwebs over eyes even now. Because a lot of our system of education under which we operate tell us that this book knowledge that the queen was head of state and, or king, whatever, and all we need to do is to get rid of her and become a republic, and we will be independent, and we will be able to forge our own destiny. And that is not true, right? Because as James is saying here, the Caribbean is an American sea. America controls it. And that is why you see what is happening in Haiti right now, right? Every president that Haiti has ever had, particularly since the first occupation of the US in 1915 to now, until now, the US has its hand in that election, right? It means therefore the people really are not important. This opinion that the West Indies can raise all the capital it needs from its own resources is bound to shock many people, because West Indians like to feel that ours is a poor community. Now, when he begins to talk about, I'm not going to go any further, but he begins to talk about the fact that we're not as poor as we think we are, but I think that we're poorer now, because he was speaking in the 1960s, and he was talking about, he referenced China and India, who were poorer at the time than we, but China by now we know is far wealthier than any Caribbean nation. But in the 1960s, he was correct, or before, China would have been poorer, and India than many countries, many of us who were in the Caribbean region. So I just want to say here that it is time for us to read our histories and to put things into proper perspective, right? I spoke to you about the whole matter that the United States is on a quest for full spectrum dominance. And the Caribbean region is closer to the United States, perhaps, than any other region, right? Or any other country. So we've got to take stock and understand that we're not running the show, right? And if it's an IMF agreement or a World Bank agreement or some whatever treaty that needs to be signed, if it is not in the interest of the United States, right, it will not be signed, or it will be vetoed, right? So you might ask me, how then can we govern independently? That's a very good question. The answer is that I don't even think American citizens who think they're living also in a democracy are living in a true democracy, right? I don't think that the Congress, the US Congress, is really representing 100% the American people and their interests. We understand now that we live in an America that is an empire, and empires control the world. That is their agenda. That is their quest. That is their ambition. That is their goal. That is their objective. And we've got to understand that. So I just thought of sharing this article with you because when I saw that Jamaica was talking about being, well, not Jamaica speaking, but the international organization, the Gallup Poll, was suggesting that Jamaica is one of the safest places in the world. I understood very well that that is just mere propaganda being propagated by international media sources. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you enjoyed in another discussion, and I look forward to sharing my thoughts with you when next I create another video. Thank you. Bye.